We're going through a period of economic crisis that's kind of illustrated a lot of the shortcomings of conventional approaches.
It's pretty clear to everybody that economics did not, as an institution, give sufficient warning and certainly did not inform the decision-making that took place prior.
The Occupy movement has been critical. It's opened up a really dialogue that was waiting to happen, and what they've done is not only to spark things, they've taught Americans that the Americans care about this.
More and more power and wealth has been concentrated in a very small group, and that their slogan of the 1% versus the 99% is wonderfully apt.
One of the key issues is the extent to which governments get captured by relatively wealthy and powerful interests who turn the government away from serving the public towards serving their particular set of interests.
The 1%, the 99%, none of that was being discussed. And now that's at the center of the conversation rather than cut the poor people's budgets and cut back in deficits, which is a foolish economic argument. But it's been dominant politically, and they have opened that space. They've opened the question, and unless we have really good economic answers, that door's going to be closed.
I would hope for an economy in which there's a much fairer distribution of income.
A really good economic system would be one that provides you some basic security and safety net in terms of the ability to get an education and the ability to get a job.
Clean air, clean water, a safe environment, those are basic human rights. They're not commodities, and they're not privileges.
It's a very healthy movement, so I'm not likely to be the one to say, well, why don't you get a bath and go get a job and quit crybaby, and I don't like that at all. I think that's a misunderstanding of where the unemployment comes from.
First of all, you try to listen to them and they make almost no sense. These are people who are living in dirt. These were people who were involved with drugs. There were violence. There was rape. They're frustrated. Life is full of frustration. You know, they should go see a psychiatrist if they're that frustrated. They're angry people. They're angry people who are losers, who are on the outside and screaming. If they want to get involved, go into the system. Get involved. Come up with concrete proposals. You don't do it by living in dirt. You don't do it by carrying out rapes, and you don't do it by carrying out and chanting anti-American slogans.
You see, our democracy is increasingly being taken over by big money. And that's wrong. Demonstrating to take it back is the essence of free speech in a democratic society. We need to occupy our democracy.
I, for one, am increasingly concerned about the growing mobs occupying Wall Street and the other cities across the country. And believe it or not, some in this town have actually condoned the pitting of Americans against Americans.
Now, shifting topics, the Occupy Wall Street protests. You were swept into office with the enthusiasm of Tea Party activists. How closely have you been following the protests on Wall Street and other cities, and what do you make of them?
I've been watching it. It bothers me. I tell people the difference between the Tea Party and the Occupy Wall Street is that when we left the Tea Party grounds after we'd have a protest, we picked up our signs, we picked up our trash, we went home and took a bath, and we also went to work on Monday. I see these kids, many of them who are still living on mom and dad's dime, with their cell phones from Apple Incorporated. I see a lot of hypocrisy in the movement, but also see some lurking danger in the sense that they're saying that people who are successful got it somehow immorally, and it's immoral for them to have it. So therefore government, at least the president says he wants government to take from those who have been successful and give them to those who are either not working or are less successful. The danger is what if you get to this mob mentality where it says, why should I wait for the president to get my money? It is mine. I deserve to get it. I've got a brick here. Why don't I just throw the brick through the window and get what's mine? And that's the danger to this kind of philosophy. I know the president's not advocating that, but I'm afraid that that's what happens to a mob when a mob gets unruly. And so I think the president shouldn't be going around the country fostering these emotions of envy and this class warfare. I think it's unseemly and really goes against what a lot of America stands for.
Senator Rand Paul, thank you for what you're doing.
Mr. Chairman, as you know, there are people demonstrating against Wall Street in New York City and other cities around the country, and I think the perception on the part of these demonstrators and millions of other Americans is that as a result of the greed, the recklessness, and the illegal behavior on Wall Street, we were plunged into this horrendous recession we're currently in. Do you agree with that assessment? Did Wall Street's greed and recklessness cause this recession that led to so many people losing their jobs?
It had excessive risk-taking on Wall Street had a lot to do with it, and so did some failures on the part of regulators.
You're a respected figure in the United States Senate, which is a rare thing. What would your message be to them directly who are out there right now involved in Occupy Wall Street?
My message is reach out to working people, reach out to the unions, reach out to the middle class, bring people together demanding real Wall Street reform so that the function of Wall Street is to provide capital to the productive economy, create jobs that we desperately need, rather than continue to engage in speculation and casino-type activities, i.e. real Wall Street reform.
Let me now take that and for a brief moment describe Occupy Wall Street. All of the Occupy movement starts with the premise that we all owe them everything. They take over a public park they didn't pay for, to go nearby to use bathrooms they didn't pay for, to beg for food from places they don't want to pay for, to obstruct those who are going to work to pay the taxes to sustain the bathrooms and to sustain the park, so they can self-righteously explain that they are the paragons of virtue to which we owe everything. Now, that is a pretty good symptom of how much the left has collapsed as a moral system in this country, and why you need to reassert something as simple as saying to them, go get a job right after you take a bath.
Occupy Wall Street, no justice, no peace. Occupy Wall Street, no justice, no peace.
What would you like to see this movement become?
A huge revolution that just goes everywhere.
It would just be satisfying just to get one banker arrested, at least one.
Yes.
We will decide.
90% of the people make the money that 1% of the people benefit from. It's not fair. I'd like to see it become a movement that actually, makes some change. Like the anti-war movement in the 70s actually brought the soldiers home and ended the war. I'd like to see the same thing happen. Redistribution of wealth that makes sense for people that need it.
This is what it is. We're fighting for the transition of power of the state to the people. It's so simple.
My problem with that movement and the Tea Party movement, both of them, is they have no leaders. They have no institutions, and you can celebrate democracy if you think it's useful to have a movement with no leaders. But if you have no leaders and no institutions, you have no direction, you have, I think, no lasting power, but you have nobody to be serious and be rigorous and say, here are the problems we all agree on, here's what we're offering. And if you have no leaders, you're not going to have any structure for a set of solutions. And politically, you're not going to be defined by your best people, you're going to be defined by your worst, who are going to be the most disruptive. And that's, I think, what's happened to the Occupy movement. So I just think a movement needs leaders and institutions to have staying power, as the civil rights movement did. But I think the banks should be broken up, as they do. And nonetheless, it's not enough just to raise the issue, and I give them credit for that. You've got to have some solutions. That involves studying the issue. Things are complicated. And then the final point, and this is what the mayors are facing all around the country, is you have a right to raise issues. You have a right to protest. You don't have a right to occupy parts of your city. And so there is a balance mayors are dealing with, and I think they've been very lenient with the Occupy movement. But as these efforts mount, I think they're right to try to restore some order while giving them the right to protest.
The beginning of everything. It needs to become a change so that the people actually, so we have a real democracy and not a corporate democracy.
What it already is. It's all over the nation. And we're in 3 countries. I would like to see more people become awake and aware of what's going on. There's white collar crimes going on. The criminals are in the White House, not on the streets.
I want the entire country to be up in arms and out in the street. And I'm afraid that it'll have to become a little more dire for everyone to join the movement. But eventually, we might see that.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.